Hello. Today we're going to have a coffee with the American composer Jennifer Higdon.
Right. Let's get started. I got you here too, without sugar. Good. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being so kind as to participating in this series of Coffee With. And for those of you who are watching now or listening, I'd just like to remind you, if you have any questions, just feel free to write them down, and I will ask those questions to Jennifer Higdon. I also like to let you know how I ended up having a coffee with Jennifer. We don't know each other in person. Of course, I knew her as a composer and music, but 3 weeks ago, I had another coffee with the orchestra conductor Mei-Ann Chen, and we started speaking about several female composers, and one of them was, of course, Jennifer Higdon. And then I got in touch with her, and now we are here. And, I really thank you for that. I can see you have plenty of music behind you.
There are a lot of CDs, 4,000 CDs back there, yeah.
Not bad, not bad. So you were born. I'd like this to be a discovery, and for people who don't know you, just to discover who is Jennifer Higdon as a person and as an artist. You were born in 1962. That means you are 10 years my senior, because I was born in 72. And you were born in Brooklyn. And how is it that someone who's been born in Brooklyn ends up being a classical music composer?
That's a good question. In my particular case, my parents lived in New York for a very short amount of time. I think they moved to the South, Atlanta, Georgia, 6 months after I was born. So I have a Southern accent, which confuses everyone because they always tell me I don't sound like I'm from Brooklyn. But we had a lot of, my dad was a commercial artist working at home. He had a lot of rock and roll playing. I didn't grow up in a household with classical music at all. However, at the beginning of high school, I picked up a flute. My mom had gotten a cheap flute, and I picked it up and taught myself to play. I joined the high school band. I liked it so much that I decided to major in music. Before that, I was doing tons of creative stuff because we had so many art supplies in the house because I had a father who worked in the house and he was an artist. But I have to admit, music was a new experience for me. And I have no doubt that probably I think when I was my freshman year of high school, Star Wars came out. So I think hearing the John Williams soundtrack really affected me. So I went off to college to major in music as a flute performance major and didn't know any classical music. I had to start from ground zero, learn basic theory. I finished my degree in performance, but halfway through my time in Bowling Green State University, this was in Ohio, my flute teacher had me write a little piece. So I think that was probably my opus one. It's kind of a very simplistic piece for piano and flute that has a bunch of extended techniques on the flute. Not a lot, because I didn't really know a lot. But when I graduated my bachelor's degree, I decided I was going to switch over to composition. So I applied to a bunch of schools, most of which I did not get into, but I did somehow get in to the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, which is a phenomenal conservatory. So I came to Philadelphia. This would have been back in 1986. And I've been here ever since. I completed an artist diploma at Curtis. And then I went up the street to study with George Crumb at the University of Pennsylvania, did a master's and a doctorate. And I like the city a lot. So I've just stayed here. And what's basically happened through the years, I was determined to develop a freelance career as a composer. So I teach at Curtis, but I only teach 2 hours a week. It's the whole school is adjunct because everyone teaching at the school has a career outside. Most of the teachers at Curtis play in the Philadelphia Orchestra. So I was determined to stick with freelancing to get enough commissions to be able to make a living every year. And I've been able to do it. It was a very slow start, though. I also handle my own publishing. I have a major publishing company, I'm very fortunate. Even though we're in this virus, we're still getting orders. In fact, I just had someone go out to take a package out for the Royal Concertgebouw in the past hour called for a piece. So it's been a long journey, but art has always been a part of my life. That's the thing. From as far back as I can remember, because my dad was an artist. But I was lucky that he also was a freelance artist working at home, because it kind of showed me the model of what you needed to do to be a freelance artist. So I've been able to do that, and I'm very fortunate. I mean, in the early days when I was coming out of college, I didn't have a lot of commissions. I was doing all kinds of things. I was doing music copying, I was doing proofreading, teaching, playing. But now I'm able to make my living completely from commissions, and I have enough lined up where my schedule's full for the next 4 years, and there's a waiting list beyond the 4 years. So it keeps me busy.
Actually, you're very, very, very prolific, and your music is played in all over the place. So
yeah,
it's absolutely amazing. How can you be so prolific?
You write every day. I write 4 to 6 hours every day, literally. I write every day, and I don't ever stop. So when I finish a piece, literally the next day I start the next piece. I'm always thinking about the piece that comes after the one I'm currently working on. That's always at the front of my mind, and I just move from one piece to the next. I mean, I turned in an opera, I think it was about a month ago, a chamber opera to Opera Philadelphia. I just finished also a double percussion concerto. I'm now doing the parts for that. I do my own copying too, which is sometimes a little unusual. And I started a song cycle yesterday. So it's really, I mean, I'm literally just kind of moving from project to project. My next big one is a mandolin concerto for Avi Avital. That's premiering next June with the Munich. I think it's the Munich Symphony, I think, or something. Yeah, I think that's right. So I literally just move from project to project. So a lot of people ask me this, do I ever worry about getting like stuck? And the truth is, because I work so consistently, it feels like the ideas just keep going. So it's kind of, I think composing is a little bit like working a muscle. You know, the pianists practice 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day. Composers, if you work that consistently, your brain is a muscle. It also kind of, yeah.
Later on, I would like to talk about that, but let's go back to the times when you were determined to become freelance composer, which is not easy at all.
Yeah.
And if you have a memory of those times when you, I guess, I don't know, I'm just guessing, that you write music and you have no one to play.
Yeah, it's a good question, and often the biggest battle I think that young composers have. First of all, I was lucky in that I played flute. I didn't play piano though. Probably would have been easier for me if I played piano. But playing flute allowed me to write flute pieces that I could go to universities, do residencies, and play the pieces. And because I was known as a flute player amongst flute players, they would ask me to write things. So that was probably the first step. I think what ended up happening was people who have play other instruments started hearing my music, and they started calling to ask me to write pieces. So I remember one of my very first professional recordings, or commissions actually, it just came out on recording, was a string quartet of mine called Voices. And it was the Philadelphia Chamber Music Society here. I had done some ushering for them, and they just called and asked if I would write a piece. They had a young quartet that was coming up, and they asked if I would write a piece. I thought they were calling to ask me to usher. It was literally a commission. So what has ended up happening through the years is it started off with a trickle of one piece here, one piece there, and then musicians would hear a piece and they would ask if I had something for their instrument. And if I didn't, I'd write something, or I would figure out a way to do it for them. So it's, as I've explained to a couple of composers, it really is a long game. I mean, I came out of grad school in 1994. So that was 26 years ago. And it's just been a very steady climb. I kept entering pieces into competitions. Most of the time I got rejection letters. I have like mounds of rejection letters. We all have these mounds of rejection letters. However, occasionally something would hit that would be very substantial and be very visible, like the Grammy. And when I think I first won my first Grammy, it was a recording with the London Phil and Colin Currie, the percussionist. We had done a recording of my percussion concerto. So it's kind of, you know what, I think being a freelance anything is plugging away at it. And you know that it's going to be thin, You're really going to be kind of trying to piece together a living in the early days, early years, actually, in reality. You just have to kind of keep plugging away at it and figuring out how to make the rent and eat the peanut butter.
Okay, so I've changed my position, and hopefully it works. So you were speaking about freelancing, being a freelance composer.
So the Grammy, I have 3 Grammys, and those are for the best contemporary compositions for my violin concerto, my viola concerto, and my harp concerto. It was the one I just won recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I won the Pulitzer for my violin concerto. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. I try not to think about these things because I don't let them like kind of sit in my head while I'm composing. I don't even have the Grammys here in my studio. I don't want them looking over my head. I don't want them looking over my shoulder, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So, coming back to your early days as a composer. By the way, I left my coffee in the other room. Okay, that's bad. Right.
That's okay.
One thing I'd like to speak about is for those people now who are watching, or in the future that will watch this video, and are thinking about having a career as a composer, what would be your advice?
If you're a young composer, my advice is, first of all, get to know performers, because one of the things that's been the key to my career is working with really good performers. And a lot of them I got to know through Curtis when I was a student, and then when I was teaching. I also had an advantage being a performer. I was often in ensembles. I played for my colleagues. And so I got to know some people when I was a performer. And then I got to know some people as a teacher, and then I got to know some when I was a student. So for a composer, your best advocate is going to be the performers. Those are the people who will commission you, who will be enthusiastic and champion you and take you out into the world. And so when I look back on the various commissions that I've done, my violin concerto was written for Hilary Hahn. She was in my class that I taught 20th century music at Curtis. Mm-hmm. My bluegrass concerto. That was for a bunch of Curtis kids. I wrote a piece for Jennifer Coe for violin, chorus, and orchestra. She also was at Curtis. I've written a piano concerto for Yu Wang. She was at Curtis. So a lot of it's been connections with people that I've just known through time. My percussion concerto came about because Marin Alsop, the conductor, was scheduled to come up and conduct the Philadelphia Orchestra, and she talked them into commissioning percussion concerto. She knew Colin Currie. I didn't know Colin, and she said, "Why don't you get Jennifer Higdon to write a piece for Colin?" And so I did, and it was huge. It was kind of an amazing thing. But it's interesting, Michael, I have a philosophy when I'm writing, and a lot of people think this is kind of an odd sort of philosophy. I think when you're writing, you should write like the piece you're working on is the last piece you're ever going to be allowed to write. So I try to put everything into it and do it with heart. And I think about, all right, if I don't ever get to write anything else again, what do I want to say in this piece? It's not necessarily an answer, but the other thing is I spend a lot of time really working hard on this stuff. If I'm writing about 6 hours a day, and sometimes it's up to 8 hours a day, I can write 8 hours and come up with 15 seconds of music, but I want to feel really good about those 15 seconds. So it's part of it is getting to know performers. I mean, it's kind of funny. Some of my classmates used to hang out. Some of my composer colleagues used to know other composers. Result, they only got to know composers, which was not going to be any help for them in a career. So, and as I tell my students, it usually took 10 to 15 years after I knew these people before I was actually working with them. So there's usually a gap. They get out of school, they got to get their career going. And it is on average 10 to 15 years. But I think music to me is about relationships. I think that's exactly what it's about. So it's the thing I love about music. It's like a big family, but I've been very fortunate to work with extraordinary performers and extraordinary conductors. I mean, I've worked with, I think, quite a few of the music directors of the Philadelphia Orchestra. I recently worked with Riccardo Muti. It was an incredible experience. He commissioned a low brass concerto from me, and I've worked with Wolfgang Swash and Christoph Eschenbach, and Yannick Nézet-Sangun. We have all worked together, and so it's those relationships. They're absolutely key, but they're also the thing that makes the experience rich in reality.
Right. Before we started our coffee, we were speaking about the music live in the States and music live in Europe. And you as a composer, as you are, as I said before, very prolific. Is there a difference between the life of a composer in the States and the life of a composer in Europe, for instance?
Yeah, I think it may be, it's the musical language, I think, that may be the thing that is different. I don't know as much. I know some, like I know Mark Anthony Turnage and Anna Clyne pretty well, and we talk frequently. It's interesting, both of them have made the observation at one point that composers in the US are really supportive of each other. I mean, I'm constantly trying to find opportunities for composers and connect them up with. I can't do the commissions, the number that come in the offer. So what I always do is I always like give people lists of composers that they can look at. And because we now have websites, that's pretty easy for a commissioner to do. I think the music aesthetic is different. This is the impression I have. It's really, and maybe it's a general philosophy about the role of the composer. But the thing is, I feel like your music should have use. That's kind of my philosophy. It should be used by musicians. And for me, communication is really, really key. I think it is for everyone else, but some people put a higher premium on the systems or the aesthetic that they write in. To them, that's the thing that's important. My music can change depending on the group I'm writing for. That it can be a really big difference depending on whether it's for, I did a junior high band piece. That was actually one of the hardest things I've ever written for little kids. They can't do much of anything, so you have to be really creative to figure out, beyond eighth notes, forget beyond eighth notes. And their range is about a fifth. So you have to be very careful. But the thing is, the music should be engaging for everyone, including people who might be walking into a concert hall for the very first time. I don't think you should have a PhD to have to understand the music. I want it to speak to you, even if you just happen to be walking by and hear it and say, what the heck is that? I want it to be a fresh experience. So, I mean, maybe it's just my philosophy about it. It's probably very different. My students who've gone over to Europe to study have said, oh my God, it's completely different over here, but I don't know enough about it to actually address it directly. But I can tell you that my philosophy is it's work with the performers and make the music work and make it communicate. Because you know what? I've been to a lot of concerts where I've been bored out of my mind, and even by standard repertoire, and I'm like, life is too short. Why? There's no reason whatsoever. So it's more important that the stuff works. It works on the instruments. Maybe it pushes the boundaries, but it's got to work on the instruments, because if the players feel that it works, they play the heck out of it. If they feel like there's some sort of emotional payoff for them, even though my music it's actually really hard. I don't have anything that's not difficult. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because the music is so hard. Every time I send out a commission, I always say, listen, guys, you'll look at it. It doesn't look that hard, but when you start assembling, it's difficult for absolutely everyone. And I say that having had to learn my own music. And when I've had to learn my own music to play it, I've been like, oh, God, this is so hard. I can't believe it. But, if you're the guy who wrote it, you cannot complain. You have to learn it. So, but the point is, it needs to speak. It has to speak to people. It has to speak to the performers, and it has to speak to the audience.
Right. Because I'd say to you, I had said to you that classical music up to the first quarter of the 20th century, it was mainly European. And when I say European, mainly Central European, Germany, Austria. But then there is a shift, and I think there's been more music written in the States than in Europe. Why do you think that happened?
That's a good question. I wonder, I'm wondering if part of it is funding. I don't know. I know part of the thing, and I've noticed when I was coming out of school, there were not as many new music groups, and now there are loads of them everywhere. There are also, like Philadelphia is a big city. It's a population of about 2 million. there used to be no new music ensembles, and there used to be no one who put on new music, and now there are loads of people who do that. And they're also, I think what ends up happening is there are a lot of younger people coming through the system, young conductors, young performers, who are coming up and they're interested in newer stuff, so they commission more new music. And the people they know are the Americans because they were their classmates. So Hilary Hahn's a perfect example of that. I mean, she went through Curtis. She did a commission project a couple of years ago called the Encore series for violin and piano works. And it was, but she had a mix. This was interesting. It was a mix of European and American composers. But I think part of it has to do with the fact that there are so many music schools. There's so many excellent players coming out, and same for the conductors. So when it comes time for them to actually think about what they're going to do for new music, they tend to turn to people they know. And it's often their classmates or people that have some sort of connection or something they've heard on the radio. And the radio in the US is very particular about what they play. That's the other thing. They don't play everything. They have very specific formulas. So I think maybe that's part of it, but it may also have to do with the way it's funded, the way the commissions are funded, which is often through private individuals. So those private individuals sometimes will hear something. This happens to me pretty regularly, where someone will hear something of mine and they'll say, oh, I love that piece. Gosh, I would like a piece for this. Maybe it was for the harp or something. So I will get a call from an organization that said, hey, we've got a donor who wants to basically pay for a piece. So that might be it. But it's a guess, though, Michael. To be quite honest, I'm totally guessing. I'm not really sure, but I think that might be it.
And then there's a time in your life that you start getting lots of commissions, or more and more commissions. Did that change the way you approach composing?
You know what? It didn't. I just had to plan a lot more to make sure that I wasn't overextending me. I turn a lot of things down because I want to make sure I have enough time to write the pieces that I'm writing. When I wrote my first opera, was the first time I had written an opera. This was my opera Cold Mountain that premiered in 2015. I knew that the learning curve was going to be really steep, so I literally blocked out 3 years on my calendar, which meant that all these people who were waiting on concertos, I had to shove them later into the latter half of the teens, 2016, 2017, 2018. So the trick for me is planning this out and trying to figure out, and it's always a guessing game, how long it's going to take me to write something. I've been doing this long enough now that I can kind of guess, though. I can kind of figure out how long it's going to take. Yeah, it's a lot of planning, though. And you have to stay on target. But, you know, there's nothing more inspiring than getting the brochure announcing the premiere. You haven't started the piece. So you're like, oh, I'm on it.
And now that we have a composer here, do you think you can tell how the life of a composer is just by listening to their music?
Oh, I don't know. That's a really good question. You probably have to ask other people that. I don't know. I mean, people always say they recognize my music by its sound, but my musical language changes a little bit from piece to piece depending on what I'm doing. Depends on what the project and who I'm writing for. Yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question, Michael. I don't know.
I'm asking you this because, of course, I learned from this, not directly listening to your music, because I had a conductor telling the story about it, which was your piece, Blue Cathedral, where there is a duo, a flute and a clarinet. And then this conductor, it was the New England Conservatory Orchestra, I can't remember his name, and he explained that it was a dialogue between the flute was you, and the clarinet was your brother who died. So I'd like you to tell us about this story. What's the story behind Blue Cathedral?
Yeah, it's actually probably my most famous piece. I think we're up to like 700 performances on this. It's done all over the world. I got the commission from Curtis, where I teach and where I had been a student. They were approaching the 75th anniversary, and they called and said, we're going to commission a bunch of our alumni.
I had to change location again. This is getting me crazy, and it's because my mobile
for some reason, it never happened before.
Yeah.
The battery gets hot.
It's getting
and
too
then
low. Oh,
it
it's
stops.
getting hot. Yeah. Can you plug it
So-
in? Are you able to plug in your mobile? Or you?
No, I've just unplugged it because I think it was that. So
Yeah.
But okay, we will.
So
we will
where
go
was I
on.
in the blue?
Hopefully-
Where was I was
so
going to say? Where was I
we
in the
have
blue
different
cathedral?
settings. We've been having different settings, but it's a pity because the conversation was being very interesting. Okay, you were telling what you were speaking about
Blue Cathedral, right? Okay, so I got the call for this was the 75th anniversary of Curtis, where I teach, coming up. And I started the commission. I think it was almost a year after my younger brother had died from cancer, and because it was a celebratory event, I thought I was going to write something that was very fanfare-ish for the occasion. But it turns out that that's not what my head was playing, and I know part of it was I was in the grieving process, and so as a result, I ended up. Wow, is that from there? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a train. Is that a train?
No, it's the air conditioning because it was too hot, and then hopefully it's not so hot.
So this is the way life goes, isn't it? Things happen.
Yeah, it's a pity. It never happened to me before, but okay, that's the way it works.
Oh, I know. So anyway, I was starting Blue Cathedral, and really the music that was in my head was really a different sound than what I thought it was going to be. And to be quite honest, I think because I was still so heavily in the grieving process, because it literally, I think it was like 9 months after he passed away. He passed away very suddenly. It was skin cancer. Like he got the diagnosis and he was gone in 6 weeks. So it was a very intense 6 weeks. But I think because I was processing what life was going to be about, having lost a younger brother, I realized that the truth was I needed to follow what was inside my head. And so I wrote basically a tone poem. That's what it came down to. Well, I can't hear you, Michael. The air conditioner is so loud. There we go.
Okay,
Must be the way you're
then I will turn it up. I'll turn it up.
Okay.
Yes.
Something is changing. So I actually it's so funny when I wrote it, I didn't intend to tell anyone about the programmatic aspect. That wasn't actually supposed to even be part of the discussion. But what ended up happening was the head critic for the Philadelphia Inquirer lives next door from me. And he knew my brother had passed away. And when he heard it, he realized what it was. He came to me and he said, "This is about your brother, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." I was actually really surprised. But when I was writing it, I think because I was dealing with this, one of the things that struck me when Andy was sick, I was amazed by his friends coming by to say goodbye. And I thought about the fact that a lot of people cross our paths in a lifetime, and they all contribute to a certain sense to what makes us us. And I realized, because this was for Curtis's anniversary, I thought of the history of Curtis, all the people who've gone through that school, Leonard Bernstein, Samuel Barber, Giancarlo Menotti. I mean, it's been an unreal, even Nino Rota, who wrote the music for The Godfather, he went to Curtis. So there's such a history there. And I realized that the people we get to know when we're in school mean more to us than we realize. Once you leave school, you start to realize this more. When you're in school, they're just your classmates. And so I thought to myself, it's important to kind of commemorate this kind of crossing of paths that people do. And I think thinking about the students at Curtis, I was teaching classes and I really knew quite a few of the kids, and thinking about Andy and the end of his life and the people who came by to say goodbye, I thought this is what this piece needs to be about. It needs to be a tone poem. But you can hear in the piece where I'm kind of wrestling with, is this going to be dark? Is it going to be light? Is life going to be about living, or is it going to be about dying? And you can tell in the piece where I actually make up my mind. There's a huge brass fanfare, because I was imagining floating in the entrance of a cathedral and kind of floating up towards the altar. And at the point where the brass fanfare comes in, to me, it was like flying up towards the stars. So at the end of the piece, the flute and clarinet are interacting again, and then the flute drops out, and the clarinet, I think, is the one that basically Andy's journey is going on. It's that way for everyone, but it was kind of an interesting thing to commemorate in a piece. I had no idea the piece was going to be so successful. Had I known how much the piece would get done, I never would have used these little Chinese bells in it, because I have to ship those out to every orchestra that does them. So I own 200 boxes of these bells, because every weekend somewhere in the world it's being done. So it's it's kind of an amazing thing, but it's also, you know, I wrote the piece, but to be honest, it feels like the piece belongs to the world now. It's not mine anymore. It belongs to the world.
No, because and this is your most performed piece.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, easily. Yeah.
Had your brother anything to do with music?
No, not really. He loved playing rock and roll. When he was dying, I remember we were sitting out on the beach. We'd rented a house in Virginia Beach, and I told him I'd write a piece that would honor him in some way. So his middle name was Blue, which is where, yeah, he lived on Cathedral Street in Baltimore, but I was thinking of Cathedral kind of as a touchstone in a piece. But I think using his middle name of Blue, because my dad was an artist, I got an ordinary middle name, Elaine. But by the time my brother was born, my dad was like, well, he might want to be an artist one day, and he may want to go by his middle name, so let's name him a color. This freaked my grandparents out, but I thought it was kind of a cool thing, yeah.
Good. What have been your influences as a musician?
Yeah, I'd have to say first and foremost, without question, the Beatles, because that's what I grew up listening to a lot when I was young. That's probably the thing I listened to the most, especially the Sgt. Pepper's album. My dad, being an artist, bought that album because he wanted to study the cover, and he gave the record to me. So I played it a lot. But after that, once I started getting into classical music, I think it kind of went through the American school, Aaron Copland, Samuel Barber, then Debussy, Ravel. I love the Impressionists. I kind of backed into the music. But I have to admit, even now, my influence also runs into country, bluegrass. It crosses all kinds of different spectrums. You can hear quite a bit of bluegrass in a couple of my pieces. My opera Cold Mountain has a lot of bluegrass in it. I have a bluegrass concerto that's very popular. But I also have my percussion concerto I wrote for Colin Currie has kind of a rock section in there too. So it's I think everything a composer hears influences them. There's no getting around that, because you're basically programming the computer up here. Your imagination, your creativity, it gets wired a certain way from the stuff you listen to. My dad, because he was a commercial artist and worked at home, he always had music playing. So, but it was usually 60s folk and rock, Bob Dylan, the early reggae. I mean, it's kind of amazing. I look back on acoustic folk music, Peter, Paul and Mary, the Kingston Trio. So, but he also was into taking us to experimental rock, experimental film festivals. Yeah. So I feel lucky because I got a chance. This was a big influence for me when I was young. I got a chance to go to a lot of art happenings. We were living in Atlanta. They were very disorganized and things were going wrong on the stage all the time. And I can remember at the age of 6 looking at the adults on the stage going, these guys got to get their act together. So I realized early on, you got to kind of plan effectively. If you want to make your art to get out there, you can't just throw it out there. You really need to think about how it's going to be executed. That came from sitting in the audience watching adults having problems with I guess they had films running and people were on the stage, and an experimental soundtrack where someone had been scratching on tape. So I learned a lot as a kid just sitting in the audience watching people trying to create art. It was very instructive.
And what things, maybe this is a stupid question, because when someone dedicates his life to something, then maybe these questions for that person are not too relevant. But for me, I think it's relevant. What inspires you to write music?
Performers. It's literally the performers. I really get to know the people I'm writing for. I think about what they're going to go through, because I've played a lot of new music, and because I've also conducted some new music. I don't conduct much anymore because my schedule is too crazy. It's so full with writing. But it's always 100% the performers. I think about what they're going through. My music is pretty difficult, but I'm up to like 14 concertos. I think I just finished my 14th concerto. They get done a lot. and the players are so enthusiastic, and it's kind of an amazing thing to be able to tailor a piece to an individual player or a group of players. Like I wrote a concerto for Eighth Blackbird, the new music ensemble. They're absolutely phenomenal. We were coming up through school at the same time, and we kind of like launched our careers at the same time. And we were in the beginning when we worked together, none of us were known. We weren't known at all, but our careers have kind of gotten bigger and bigger. And along the way, they asked for concerto. I remember Tim Monroe, their flute player. I was in London, actually. I had a performance of my percussion concerto, and Tim Monroe was there, their flute player at the time, and he came up to me and says, "You have to write a concerto for us." So I'd already written 2 works for them, and I thought, wow, what an interesting challenge. So it was a lot of fun to figure something out for them, to tailor it. And it's an unusual piece. It starts with bowed piano. They're all inside the piano, bowing it, which is extraordinarily unusual. And probably the first time any concerto in the world has been started where all the players have their soloists have their backs to the audience. It freaks the audience out, but the sound is so incredible. It's so mysterious that they're totally drawn in. It's very cool to see, but it's always the performers.
Right. You mentioned you've conducted.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think to be a composer you need to conduct first?
Not really. I think it's funny. In my undergrad, I studied conducting with, of all people, Robert Spano. This was a weird fluke. He was coming out of college and he got a job at Bowling Green. And I consider him probably one of my more influential mentors. And by some weird freak coincidence, and this was completely a coincidence, Robert was engaged to conduct the world premiere of Blue Cathedral. It was completely an accident. It had been 15 years after I'd left Bowling Green, but he was engaged, and he had just gotten a job with the Atlanta Symphony, and they had a recording contract. So that those simple little things lining up kind of made my career fall in place. And I tell composers all the time, there's a lot of stuff you can't predict what's going to happen. So what you have to do is do the best you can with the one thing you can control is your composing. You can't control who's going to handle what, the performance is going to be like, what the venue is going to be like, if there's going to be an audience, if there's going to be a power outage, if anyone's going to attend. There's so many elements you can't control. But if you're doing the best that you can, then that's about all you really can do. That's really about all you can do. So it's an incredible learning experience, I have to say. But you know what, Michael, I'm still learning. I mean, all the time. I have so much to learn. And I'm still, I'm getting ready to write this mandolin concerto for Avi Avital. I am trying to learn as much about that instrument as I can. And I'm in the early stages. So part of this is also kind of refreshing for me because I get to do the research and I get to learn about the instrument, learn about the players, learn about the history. I listen not only to classical pieces, all the Vivaldi and the Bach, but I also listen to bluegrass. There's a lot of mandolin in country and bluegrass. So I try to learn about the instrument combinations. I mean, and sometimes you really have to. When I wrote a harp concerto a couple of years ago, that was an interesting challenge. The harpists don't have a ton of concertos. Same for when I wrote a tuba concerto. I was like, I'm writing a tuba concerto. Oh my God, what the heck do I look at? So I looked at the tuba concertos out there and I tried to figure out, all right, what would a tuba player need if they don't want to do the Vaughan Williams again with an orchestra, if they need a second concerto, what needs to be in that concerto? So I literally I talk to them a lot. I take excerpts of music. Sometimes I send an email, a PDF of something, ask them to try it. They'll record it and send it back via email. And I think, wow, what a world we live in. It's amazing that we can actually do it this way, that we can actually communicate via like this.
Yes.
I can talk to you
and with all the interactions in the world.
Exactly. So occasionally things go wrong, but that's okay. We still get back on the horse, you know?
Yeah. Now that you said that, because one of my aims with this series of A Coffee With is for those people who usually don't particularly listen to classical music, because they think, well, because I don't know what the reason could be, but it's not their cup of tea, so to say. What would you tell them, or better said, to what extent music has changed your life, and through music you've changed the lives of others?
Well, I can say it's changed my life completely. That without question. I have no idea how it changes the lives of others. I don't like ask people's perceptions. I can only tell you from the letters I get and emails I get that people are moved. But, you know, I also get letters from people who are saying, what was that? So what was that you wrote, you know? But I have to say I'm pretty lucky in that the response is pretty amazing. When we were testing this yesterday, we were trying to figure this out. I think we went through my page. I don't know if you saw how many people were coming on. It was like a huge number of people, and it happened really fast. And I was kind of shocked. I was amazed, and people are like, "What is this? What's happening?"
Let me tell you something about that, because, of course, we don't know each other in person, but I can tell because of what I've been talking to you in the previous days and now. Apart from your talent as a composer, which is there and everybody can check, I think it's your personality that makes people, because you are very engaging, very, very easy. And I don't know, I'm going to be very honest with you.
Yeah.
When I first contacted you, I said, okay, I'm sure she's very busy. She's not going to join me for a coffee. I'm sure, because you are busy. You are really busy. And but it was like I was, I don't know, very approachable person, and I think this is what makes you even greater.
Good. I know it should be, you know, and the thing is, we're all in this together, you know. I mean, really, making music, making art, we're all in this together. I don't see myself being above anybody. I mean, we're all colleagues. We really are. And I think, you know, it's kind of worrisome. We're all wondering what's going to happen with this virus. We're wondering about all the performing arts organizations. And it's so imperative that we all work together to make sure we can keep things afloat and keep things healthy. And even my one employee he just graduated from school who works for us, I've not been able to have him in because of the restrictions in Philadelphia, but I'm keeping him employed. I have to keep him employed because the fact of the matter is I don't want him suffering. I know he's at the early stage of his career and it's so important, but the thing is we're all in this together. And I think it's really important to always be able to help other people, to reach out, find a way to make things happen. So it may make your day a little more crowded. That's fine. It's okay to have your day be a little more crowded. You know what? It's good to meet people, and I like talking to people. It's fascinating. I learn things. This is the thing. I learn things, so it's well worth it.
Now that you mentioned this situation we've been having in the last 4 months or so, the lockdown, has it affected the way you write or your schedule, so to say?
It hasn't actually affected my schedule because I have the commissions all lined up anyway a couple of years in advance. So what it did allow me to do was to kind of catch up on, I had gotten kind of behind on the double percussion concerto. One of the things I did notice was that piece is very, very positive sounding. And when you write for percussion, when you're featuring them, you have to decide which of the instruments you're going to use. And the thing that occurred to me, I couldn't figure out what was going on in my head because I was in the early stages of this when I came off the road. I had been recording with the Nashville Symphony. I'd actually been out on the road. And I came back to Philadelphia. And the thing was, I realized that what I ended up writing was more like reaching forward into the future and being very positive. That for me, so the piece has a real positive spin, but it also, as a consequence, I wrote for all pitched percussion. Well, it had not been my original plan, but it just turned out that way. But I am literally, because I've had so many premieres, I think I had 100 performances that have been either postponed or canceled. It was a lot of performances, but what I'm doing is I'm writing a lot now as much as I can because I know what's going to happen is things are getting scheduled for next year. It's going to be much tougher. I won't have it. I'll be on the road more. So I'm trying to anticipate how much travel I'm going to have in order to make sure I'm getting things written on time. So that I have to admit, though, being in quarantine is very much like my life of sitting here writing. I write for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and then I go out for a residency somewhere or a recording project or something, and then I come back and I'm by myself writing. So I think quarantine for a composer is very much like not being in quarantine for a composer. It's very similar. So I know. I worry though about the performers. This is the thing I am most concerned about. I have an opera that was supposed to be premiering in September with Opera Philadelphia. And in fact, I think one of my singers was on here at one point. I saw her name come up, Fleur Barron. She's incredible, but it's not, they're going to have to postpone it. I mean, the fact is Philly just announced yesterday, the mayor announced, they're not allowing any performances to happen to Philadelphia until after February 28th. So we're now already, but I suspect, judging from the way things are going in the U.S. and the number of infections and people not wearing masks and taking care, this could be a full year easily, maybe a year and a half before things get going again. That's really hard for performing arts organizations. They don't get support from the government here in the U.S. So it's private donors. So I think it probably depends on, there's so many variables, and you can kind of see everybody's very apprehensive. A lot of people are being furloughed. So it's a worrisome time. I don't really know what's going to happen. I keep telling people, wear a mask. You go out, wear a mask, be careful. But there are parts of the U.S. where people are not doing that. And it's going to have an effect on the arts in general.
Yeah, I say. Earlier, you mentioned your string quartet Voices.
Yes.
And I know there is a new recording.
Yes.
Now.
There is the Pacifica Quartet. I just released this, I think it was last week. I'm on with Ellen Zwillick, the first winner of the Pulitzer Prize, first woman winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and Shula Matran, who I think might have been the second winner of the Pulitzer Prize. And it wasn't planned this way. I think I was winner number 4 or something. They haven't had many women win the Pulitzer, but I've known the Pacifica Quartet a long time. They were also just coming out of school when I got to know them. We were at a festival together. We were paired as the young quartet, young composer, and they did this piece. That was back in 1997, so it was a little while ago. And they've put together an amazing recording. It's absolutely stunning. I think I have it here somewhere. Wait a minute. I'm reaching.
Yeah.
There it is right there. Yeah. It's phenomenal. The recording is just incredible. It's an amazing group. They're divine to work with, and producers did such a good job with it. And listening to Shula Matran's piece and Ellen Zwillick's, I was like, wow, these are masters. It's an honor to be on with them.
You've been mentioning women composers, and I know, as I said before, music live in the States is a bit different from music live in Europe. How is the situation of women composers at the moment?
Yeah, it's actually getting better. It's slowly getting better. It's amazing how many women composers there are, and they're really excellent composers. I think orchestras are getting better about looking around and saying, oh, there are women composers out there. The thing that's most important for people to know, I think, orchestras, I remember when my violin concerto was done down with the Baltimore Symphony, we had post-concert talks. Hilary Hahn was playing, Marin Alsop was conducting, and I remember we went out on stage with microphones, and basically this was a chance for the audience to ask us questions. It was shocking every night. We had 3 nights of performances, how the audience was so excited. They mentioned it every night, how great it was to see 3 women up there. And I have to admit, the first night, it didn't occur to any of us. The first time someone mentioned it, we all kind of looked at each other. We're like, oh, yeah, it's 3 women up here. The audience broke into incredible applause. They were so excited. But people mentioned it every single night. And the thing that I find amazing are the little kids who come up to me and said, it's good to see a girl on the stage. That's what they say. It's good to see a girl on the stage. So you realize, to be relevant in today's society, really you need to kind of reflect your society. And maybe that's an American thing. It may be the world over, but it's a conversation we have a lot here in the U.S. It's improving. It has lots of room to improve. But, I also cannot complain. With 200 performances a year, I can't say someone's not playing my music because I'm a woman. I mean, it's amazing. I feel so fortunate to have so many performances. So we're working on making it better for everyone. And
what's the one thing you haven't done that you'd love to do as a composer?
That's a good question. I have to admit, I've been lucky to do all the things I've wanted to do. A couple of years ago, if you'd asked me, I probably would have said opera, but now I've written 2 of those. I have to come up with something because really, at one point it was a violin concerto, and then it was a piano concerto. I mean, I've actually been ticking off the things. So I need to think about that. I'll get back to you, Michael.
Okay, yeah, please. Okay, although we have a lot of interruptions, we are almost already an hour. I mean, not counting.
We can go a little longer if you want, since we had the interruptions.
But there are, as you know, there are 3 fixed sections this series of A Coffee With, and one of them is on books, and is what kind of books you read, and if there is any you would recommend.
Oh, that's a really good question. Yes, I read all kinds of books. I read fiction, nonfiction. I have to look up this book I just finished that was so stunning. Let me look this up. I'm typing this. I just finished a fiction book that I thought was completely incredible. It's called The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. It's a fantastical book that weaves one of the most incredible in-depth tales about books and about reading and the life of storytelling. And I have to admit, this was a magic. It was a book of magic. I just finished it like a week or 2 ago, and I'm grieving it being over. But it's a book that has such incredible descriptions, such lyrical lines, that it's the kind of thing I'm going to revisit. I can tell that I'm going to go back. When I read fiction and I read nonfiction all the time, and I'm kind of alternating. I was just reading a book on Hamilton, the musical. They put together a book, Lin-Manuel Miranda put together a book talking about each one of the songs in that musical and how he put it together and what he was thinking and what the references are to other things in pop culture and the past. So I've been looking at the construction of that, trying to figure out how he assembled such a story that was so coherent and so well told in hip hop, basically. It was kind of an amazing thing. So, but get The Starless Sea, Erin Morgenstern, incredible book.
Okay. Yeah, I'll note it down.
Yeah.
And if there is any recordings you listen to or you would like to recommend?
Oh, that's a good question. I listen to so many recordings, I have no idea what to recommend. Right now I'm listening to a lot of mandolin concertos. So, that I don't know how to answer that one. I'm constantly listening to everything my colleagues do. So as you can see behind me, I have thousands of CDs, and I still buy CDs, but I literally am going through like multiple discs every day, and I'm not sure what to recommend. That's a really good question. I explore so much stuff, and I don't just listen to classical. I also listen to country. I listen to rock. I listen to rap. I listen to everything. But I have to confess, I'm not sure what to recommend. I'm blowing through so many recordings. I may be an outlier in the coffee series, Michael. Sorry about that.
No worries. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that I like the most from these coffees, because I find it a bit transcendental. Imagine someone in 100 years would watch us talking now. What message would you have for that person? None of us would be here.
Be kind. That would be my message. Be kind. Because you know what? It works for the art you make, and it works for living, and it makes the world a better place. So be kind. It's a very universal. It's something, a reporter asked me recently, what was the most important thing your parents taught you? And they thought I was going to say something about art, because I grew up in such an artistic household. Although I have to tell you, my parents were like, they listened to rock and roll. They didn't listen to classical. And they look at me and they're like, what happened? It's like I was the black sheep. I went into classical music. My parents had the rock and roll going, But I think the biggest thing that they taught me was to be kind. It was the most important lesson, and it has consistently held held me up in life no matter what I was facing. And you know what? The thing is, we all face ups and downs. There's no escaping it. No one escapes it. You're going to have loss. You're going to have gains. And some of my years where I've had incredible gains, I've also had incredible losses. And they've happened in close proximity. So you just have to put one foot forward in front of the other and just keep going and do the best you can. And when you can, help as many people along the way as you can. It will make your life so much richer.
That's a good piece of advice, and I can tell you are really kind. Since we first got in touch, I was amazed, and I had some friends asking me and say, "Oh, are you having a coffee with Jennifer Higdon?" and I was like, "Yes," and she's really kind too. I can tell. So you walk the talk.
Thank you. That's the ultimate compliment, Michael. I really think it is.
Yeah, and these days I was listening to your music intensively, and it was a kind of, although we are thousands of kilometers away, kind of being in contact with you, because although we haven't met in person, for me it's been a great experience talking to you, learning about you. As you said, I'm always learning as well. You're a learner. I'm a constant learner, and I know I will keep learning from you a lot. And hopefully someday we'll have another coffee in person. I was not so with so many accidents in between because it's been. But in the end, it worked out. There are lots of topics I would have liked to speak about with you, but unfortunately we have a limited time.
But you know what? We'll have a coffee down the road. I have a feeling, I don't know about Spain, but I can tell the U.S. is going to be in this for a while. So.
And honestly, and I said that honestly, as I said, I don't know you in person, but I can tell. I have that feeling, and I mean, I'm being very honest. You are a very kind person. So, and I have to say, surprisingly, because sometimes in this world of art, it's not easy to find that kind of people.
Yeah,
so, but you are, and I can tell.
Well, thank you, Michael. I think you're very kind too. You've been fantastic to get this set up, because man, we had challenges, and it wasn't you; it was all me. Like, wait, what?
No, and in the end, it was me having the problems, because I had everything set up, my computer, everything, and then my mobile phone went wrong. So
it happens.
It was a real pleasure. We'll keep in touch, and I'll be one of your music promoters, because I think
thank
people
you.
should listen to your music. And of course, if they have the opportunity to meet you, to see you and talk to you, I encourage you all that are watching, just talk to her.
Come up and say hi.
Very kind and nice person.
We will meet someday, Michael. I have complete confidence. One of these days, when I have a performance in Spain, I will get there.
Yeah,
I've missed most of mine recently, but yeah, absolutely. So, but it's a real pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'm
You're quite welcome. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye. Be safe.
Be safe. Bye-bye.
Yes.